slide.
Right now.
Yes.
So, they said, we're both religious orders. Let's settle the dispute. And what we could do is maybe have some type of a theological debate. And the winner of the debate gets the apple tree. And then it's settled. So they both agreed. The Dominicans chose the subject, God. And the Franciscans got to choose the way that the format of the debate would take place. And it was kind of along the lines of something that you've heard said of St. Francis, which Franciscans tell me never actually said, but it's beautiful. So, preach always, use words when necessary. So the Franciscans said, no words for this debate. Dominicans said, okay, it was your call. So the day of the debate arrives, and the Dominicans had chosen their top theologian. This guy had all kinds of degrees. He taught different universities. He wrote books. The Franciscans chose their cook. They decided that the Dominicans would start the debate. So, theologian, Dominican, he rises majestically, and he holds up one finger. Goes back to his seat and sits down. Franciscan, in a way, a little bit more salt of the earth. He gets up, kind of shaking his head, furling his brow, and he holds up 2 fingers. The Dominican nods knowingly. He rises, and he holds up 3 fingers. Sits back down. Barely touches his seat. The Franciscan springs up and starts waving his arms like this. The Dominican is shocked. He bows his head and he concedes defeat. His brothers are stunned. The Franciscans are stunned, but they're elated. They hoist the cook up on their shoulders. They're, yelling, celebrating. The cook doesn't know what to do. They each go back to their respective monasteries. Franciscans go and celebrate the apples, apple cider, apple pie. It's their tree now. Back at the Dominican monastery, they say, brother, what happened? And he said, well, I got up and I said, God is one. And then he got up and responded, yes, but in Jesus there's 2 natures. To which I said, but God in his very nature, in his essence, is 3 persons in one God. And then he said, and this I did not expect, yet God fills all things. Back to the Franciscan monastery. They're like, brother, what happened there? Did you know that guy was their top theologian? And the cook was like, really? No, I didn't know. They said, well, tell us, how'd you do this? And he said, well, I'm waiting. And he gets up and he says, I'm going to poke your eye out. So I got up and I said, well, I'm going to poke both your eyes out. And then he got up and said, I'm going to poke all 3 of your eyes out. So I told him, I don't have 3 eyes. Theology. It's not easy. There's something in us that longs for a simplicity of theology. You can see this in everything from Islam, and we're going to go over a little bit what we went. This is only the second class, so it's kind of
She skips
something of a regurgitation. Yeah, we got to work on that.
Yeah.
Skipping classes.
Go on the wedding.
100% of your grade.
No, there's something that I think each of us can sense it, a desire for simplicity of things. So I mentioned this last time. And you see that, like, if you have discussions with Muslims, with Jehovah Witnesses, with respect to the nature of God, for example, it's like, why does it have to be so complicated? Where do you come up with Trinity? It's easy. I've had these conversations with Jehovah Witnesses, with Muslims. It's like, it says in the Bible that God is one. That's it. I had a Jewish friend down in Laredo, Texas. I would meet with him every week. And did I tell you guys this? And he said, you know what? You Christians. But he attributed it to St. Paul, the whole thing about the Trinity. He said, Paul, brilliant marketing. He said, Paul, he was coming from a Jewish background, so he understood, the milieu that needed one God, the monotheistic tradition of the Jewish people. And at the same time, he had to deal with the polytheism of the Greek world and the Roman world. So what does he do? He comes up with the Trinity, the best of everything. He said it was great marketing. And he meant that as a compliment. But I think that we can, at some level, understand the desire for the simplicity of things. Also, and I won't go into it, but at the moral level, the same rabbi who's like, you guys, you Catholics, you're all kind of like trying to get to the intention and what you really mean and how important that is. He says, no, it's real simple. You just execute and you're just. That's it. You don't have to do it with some kind of like smile on your face, with some kind of good feeling in your heart. You give somebody $50, you're just. Whereas you Catholics, you seem to try to want to, complicate things. What's your intention? What's the attitude that you're doing things with? So, the question, though, isn't, should we make things simple or difficult, but what is the truth, right? What's the truth about the reality that we are trying to understand? And if it's personal reality, to come into communion with. How do we reach those things? What I'm going to do, or what I'm going to attempt to do, I'm not going to do, anything extraordinary, but it's going to be kind of like a bird's eye view, which, in one sense, it can help you kind of situate certain things, and that's good. That helps to put things into order, right? I mentioned last time, don't worry about memorizing things, right? I'm not going to give any tests. Nobody told me that I had to do anything like that. But I really do want you to be at some level, don't be overwhelmed by this stuff, but try to make some kind of a connection where you're engaged in a way that it elicits questions. That is extremely important. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult at a certain level, and don't force it, But yeah, that's what I would like to happen. So, an overview will help us situate things, but it can also give us the illusion that we've actually discovered certain connections, existentially, like in our own experience, that we haven't. Right? So I'm going to be presenting various things, and you might be able to memorize perfectly. If you had a photographic memory, you might be able to remember what I said better than I remember what I said. But that doesn't mean that either I nor you understand these things. There has to be some kind of a real searching, that leads to a discovery. And then we can see how, more profoundly than just kind of like the overview of it, how these things really fit together. So, there's me, and that me stands for you. I hear the steaks talking. It's
Ice cream.
oh, it's the ice cream?
And cookies.
I thought that. I mean, the steak was pretty rare. It's like, it could move still. So, we have the reality, everything that is, things that exist, the height of the reality, God, right? This stands for Most Holy Trinity, there. And then there's me, which stands for you, each of you, not just me. And what we want to do, we see that there are ways that we can access the reality. We have in us capacities as human beings that go beyond other, things in reality, whether it be inanimate reality, rocks, books, or whatever, or even animate reality, plants, animals. We have capacities that allow us to really engage with reality so that we can understand it. Right? We're not just predetermined, we're not just programmed. Which is definitely not the predominant worldview in the West. Right? So, we have these capacities. And with those capacities, we can come to discover the things as they exist. And simultaneously, because I'm part of this, we discover ourselves. And again, that's more profound than a common understanding of what that entails, which is usually the psychological level or the physiological level. Right? So, in our experience, our human experience, starting with wonder, which leads to questions, which, through an analysis, allows us to discover certain principles in reality, like the human soul, for example. It's not something that you just say, oh yeah, it's obvious. I've got a soul. We all believe that, right? It's part of even our Christian faith. We're told that. So why do I have to discover it, right? Well, to the extent that we seek for the things that are most profound, here again, I discover who I am most profoundly. And I am able to know profoundly and love profoundly. If I don't search profoundly, I'm not able to do those things. Right? And so it's, in a sense, it's natural to want to come to an understanding of what's in the things around us that exist in the most, intense and profound way possible. To not just stay at the superficial, the things that are upon the surface. And we can, through this search for the truth, and what is truth? Does anybody know what truth is?
God.
Huh?
God.
You can't just rush at a human level. I was telling them last time, it's like over here they have a mass with the school children. And God's is the number one answer to everything. God, Jesus, love. Jesus says, I am the truth. But here, if we're looking at the human level, not even just the human level, do you know what constitutes truth?
Perfect order.
I think it has something to do with that. But an order can exist independent of you. When is something true?
It's real.
Huh?
It's real.
Okay. There is a distinction that if I can remember right, I hadn't planned on talking about this distinction, but there is an ontological truth, which means, okay, it's true insofar as it exists. But now, true for us, well, I know that something's true. It's a formal truth. That means the form in my intelligence corresponds to what it exists, to what is. St. Thomas says that. I don't know if he gets that from Aristotle, but I think he gets that from reality. Something is true when what I know corresponds to what exists. Right? Now, I don't want things to get too complicated. An area where this can become kind of confusing is at the level of artistic reality. Right? There, and it's not pejorative, not necessarily, but there, I take in reality at a certain level, the qualities of reality, sound, color, form, movement, words, and in that, I synthesize, make a synthesis inside of me, which then becomes an idea that can be expressed in a work of art. A song, a poem, a dance, a sculpture, a painting, something like that. Now, what is the truth of that? Well, there it does correspond to what's inside of me. Right? Does that make sense? The difference?
Can you go over it again?
Okay. So.
Sorry.
No. That's all right. It's difficult for me to explain, but that's good. I need to be able to do that. So. Take something artistic, right? Yeah, the statue. Now, at a certain level, insofar as it exists, right? If you were to say that statue is, a frog or a meatloaf or a book or whatever, what you have inside of you does not correspond to what's outside of you. Does that make sense?
So
I think that is a meatloaf. I think that is a meatloaf in the corner. Right? It's kind of absurd, but it gets the point across.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you don't have the truth inside of you if you really think that is a meatloaf. Now, you could make some kind of an artistic association, right? Let's not use meatloaf this time. Where there can be some kind of a poetic license in seeing the statue in a way that goes beyond its mere existence. Mm-hmm. But based on some kind of a poetic license, this is solidarity, an abstract term. There's, where do you see solidarity outside of you, right? But you can make some kind of an association with the symbolic value, mm-hmm. right? That is coming from inside of you now. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So the point of reference is shifted because it's an artistic interpretation from the object simply as it exists to an artistic kind of twist to it.
So universal.
This is a sunrise.
Understanding.
So one's a universal truth, and one is kind of my understanding of that universal truth?
No, the one is just the concrete existence of something and the extent to my to which
Your experience.
my experience and my knowledge corresponds to this as it exists, apart from any type of a religious, Christian, Catholic association. It's a statue of a woman holding a child, right? But now I can make some kind of an association that's artistic. It's a sunrise. And there's a lot that converges there. But I become the point of reference there for an artistic interpretation of this, which is okay as long as we are clear at what level we're looking at the reality. Does that make sense? Because if I engage reality only at a level that is symbolico-artistic, right? Then I am constantly the point of reference for everything. And that can become very dangerous. And I think that it explains actually, why society is as it is. This is how I want to interpret, this type of action, this type of behavior. I'm the point of reference. I think that this is something that is, appropriate, something that's good, something that's beautiful, no matter what people say. Right?
Is that the same thing as pragmatic person?
Pragmatism.
Yeah, that's what we went over.
Or relativism. It's relative.
It is a type of relativism. I don't think that it necessarily means that it's a pragmatism.
Okay.
It's more attached to kind of an artistic way of viewing the world, but in a way that could be detrimental. So we all have our artistic kind of temperament, right? The way things that will affect us, and different people are different. Some people are more sensitive to sound. Some people are more sensitive to colors and form. Some are more sensitive to movement, right? And you do get that from reality. But then inside of me, there's a synthesis, and I think this is one of the things that you'll definitely be looking at in the philosophy of art. But I just wanted to illustrate it here because at the level of truth, we have to be clear, what are we talking about? A truth insofar as it's objective and outside of myself, or a truth where I become the point of reference because I've synthesized certain things and I have now reinterpreted. This is a sunrise. There might be something legitimate in saying that. Definitely more legitimate than saying this is a meatloaf. Right?
Because then you're redefining what meatloaf is.
Or more immediately, I'm redefining what the statue is. Yeah.
But then, so you're saying then that you have to come to know something objectively outside of yourself. But then
Yes.
someone would respond and say, well, I'm me and I have my senses, so how can I come to know something outside of me?
Okay.
Would be the response, right?
That is definitely one of the responses that you would probably encounter.
Yeah.
But before we get into like the objections, and bring that up
I'm
again.
curious, no.
Yeah. We want to see, okay, what is what I would call a sane approach to reality, right? So we want to encounter things in their objectivity. That doesn't mean that we can't have this dynamic of inspiration, intuition that synthesizes things at a certain level, in a way that's artistic. But we need to be very clear at what level we're operating and discussing things at, right? There's also different ways that we can encounter the objective reality, different levels, right? So I mentioned the one, artistic. You can say, I really don't like that shade of blue. I think that it should be, a little bit darker, or a little bit lighter or whatever, right? We could also do a chemical analysis of the composition of the statue, a scientific kind of examination. Same statue, same reality. We're looking at something in its objectivity, right? But it's different than an artistic. Could look at it insofar as, it's the history, how it got here. We could look at it in the context of, who was personally attached to it. Things like that, right? There's different perspectives for the same reality. It might be even more clear if we use like the example of a person. So a human being, you can look at the level of their biochemistry, at their blood type, things that are more of a scientific nature. You can look at them in their kind of psychological, sociological environment and how that contributed to, who they are, the influences that they had. Again, that's something that's more of a soft science, right? The psychology of an individual. You could also look at them more profoundly, in their existence as a human being. What does that mean to exist as a human being? So it's the same reality, but there's different levels. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And here we're in the realm of our human experience. This is something that any human being should have access to engage, encounter, experience reality at different levels, but always, if they're truly engaged in their own humanity, looking for what is most profound, what's deepest in that. Do you have any questions concerning that? Okay, that's at a human level. At a divine level. So now that we're getting into the area of faith, here we can also experience the same realities that are around us, right? But what is different now? Now, I asked this question the last time, and you answered well. Yeah.
Are you sure?
So if we ascend to the highest things that we can come to the conclusion exists in reality, which is God, right? And here I'm assuming that is a very rigorous kind of like discovery. We all believe it, but to really understand, to know it like with everything that our intelligence is capable of, it's not easy, right? Our acceptance is usually more effective. I have a sense that God's there. Something, a feeling, more than a feeling. But that's not as far as our mind can go. Well, isn't it enough? Come on, brother. As long as I know you exist. But now, there is something about God's own inner life that it's impossible for us to discover. No matter how intelligent we are, no matter how much we desire to know the truth, right? With our human capacities, our intelligence, and our love for reality. Those two things always go together, right? And that is, God is three persons in nature. God is triune, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. A community of love, where each person is completely God. There are 5 of us in this room, 5 persons, 1 nature. But, as much as I would like to, I do not possess the fullness of the human nature. And neither do you. And here, in the Most Holy Trinity, something that goes beyond our understanding. Each person possesses completely the entirety of being God. There's not a portioning out. Right? The only way that we can know that is through a divine capacity that's given to us in faith. Faith gives us access to divine realities. Right? And so, in human experience, we can and we should try to go as far as possible in discovering reality in its deepest aspect. But that still will not give us access to the inner mystery of reality, and especially the ultimate reality, which is God. But that could also be said of any person now, right? In a perspective of faith, in a sense, everything will now be, but it will be linked to God in his mystery as most holy Trinity. Now, that's not something that, when you're playing basketball, you're not thinking, whoa, basketball, it's united to the Trinity at the level of creation. You don't do that. But, when you kind of take a step back, and you probably wouldn't focus on a basketball, you'd focus probably on a person, a human being, you become aware now of reality that you can experience, human experience, that you can discover all kinds of incredible things. You have a source of life in you, right? And there are signs that this source is something that will go beyond the material existence. Meaning, even though I know people die, there are things that point to something even greater. Definitely greater than material reality, but even something that points towards the eternal. We can say things like that from our human experience. But now, at the level of faith, we know, being created in God's image and being linked to God as Trinity, that we are destined, that God himself desires that we enter into this divine life, this eternal movement of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that we live of that forever. And all that implies. The intensity of love, the intensity of truth, and the intensity of creative power. Heaven will include an intensity of creative expression that has as its source God's own creative power and expression. Problem now is that usually when we have a little bit of this creative expression, it's unhinged from love and truth. That can be a problem. Not always, obviously. But in heaven, everything will be ordered. Creative expression, the power of God in us will be at the service of love and truth. Right? And faith gives us a new understanding of what a human being is and what we're destined for. C.S. Lewis, he says something very beautiful. He says, if we were able to see what anyone would become in heaven, this is a paraphrase, we would fall down. We would be kind of like inclined to adore, like you see in the Apocalypse, because of the magnificence of the presence of God kind of like bursting through the individual. the glory of God in the individual. We would be overwhelmed at the beauty, at the majesty of each person. Right? So that's how faith now will change not only our perspective of basketball, but even more importantly, each human being that we encounter. Now there are impediments to both of these, right? And it starts at the human level. If something's messed up at the human level, right, there's going to be difficulty at the divine level. Now, you and I might not be responsible for that. Right? And this is where a divine love kind of supersedes everything. So I might have been formed in a way that was, materialistic. I came from a family of scientists. Everybody was atheists. Right? That was kind of like, in a very intense way, drilled into me. That everything is just material. I've come to a point where I don't believe that, and yet my mind can't get around that. But love goes farther than that. Love goes farther than that. But still, my mind might be kind of messed up. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. Right? But, and that's each of us. Not with respect to that necessarily, meaning material existence is the totality of existence. But in each in our own ways, we have these types of impediments, right? Some of them are not our fault. Some of them are our faults, right? So, ideologies. That is taking something of reality, and again, it's kind of like in a way that we described with respect to the statue, right? It's taking something of reality that's true, but then making my inspiration of a certain association and projecting it back on that be the lens through which I interpret everything. So let me give you an example. Marxist materialism. Marxism says that the height of being a human being, which is essentially materialistic, but the height of an expression as a human being is being a worker to transform the world around us. So we have that ability. Even if we are kind of enmeshed in the material mechanism, we have this ability to transform things around us. A tree can't do that really. Well, I mean it can, but it's, in a way that a tree does. It's kind of limited. And so this ideology will extend itself in the social and the political sphere, right? Take something that's true, but it makes it the totality of what it is to be human. It doesn't really recognize the greatness, the nobility of being able to know and being able to love. Why? Because it doesn't recognize anything that's spiritual. And if it would talk about knowledge and love, it would be at knowledge, a scientific level, so knowledge enmeshed in the material world, and love enmeshed in the material world is the merely passionate aspect of love, which is real and it's good, but it's not the highest type of love, and it needs to be integrated. And if you don't see that, right, you're going to go to the lowest common denominator. And that becomes something inside of me that becomes an impediment at the human level of experience. One of the greatest impediments, St. Thomas will say that it is the greatest impediment to the discovery of the existence of God, even at a natural level, is the scandal of evil in the world, right? So there's bad things that happen all the time, whether it be, murder, rape, or a volcano going off, a tidal wave, whatever it is. Right? Okay, so you're telling me that there's a good God, and He's all-powerful. It's something that we've all heard, probably, often. It's a primary objection, and all of the major atheists will raise the specter of this objection over and over and over again. They harp on the scandal. They touch that chord. Because it does resonate, I think, in each one of us. You know? An indignation. It's like, if you hear Christopher Hitchens speak about this, he is absolutely brilliant at touching that chord of indignation at the existence of evil. Right? And here, if you're at an emotional level, which a lot of times people will make decisions based on, simply on how they feel, he's able to convince lots of people that there is no God, even people who believe that there was a God before, because of the way that he's able to show the scandal of evil. So it is something that is very difficult. Why is there evil in the world? And like I said, with ideologies, that can be something that is kind of like ambient, that you take into yourself. You might be more or less responsible. I believe we're materialists because that was the only thing that I was raised with. Or I believe that we're nothing but matter because that liberates me from any type of moral responsibility. There, if at the end of the day, if we're just material, right? If I do this or that other people are saying are wrong, it's like, what difference does it make? It's all matter. What's the matter? So, it could be individual. Men are pigs. An ideology. There could be reasons why somebody thinks that. Successive betrayals in various relationships. Something of that is understandable. But if it obscures the reality that is able to be experienced, which is not all men are pigs. Some are very generous and kind and loving, not perfect, right? But not pigs. Today, the difficulty, these are perennial things, so there are things that have always kind of like been part of the challenge of discovering reality in its fullness, and especially reality at its height. But today, even more so, because of virtual reality, it puts us inside of ourselves. It makes us more attentive to like what's inside of our imagination, right? And it's never been as strong in the history of civilization because of the various things that we have, around us that kind of immerse us in that. So that is a real challenge. And then you see, when I would meet with school kids in London, I was amazed, and this was like, these were very good Catholic schools, but in discussions, the way that they gravitated towards a materialistic understanding of everything, how science was the explanation, and even something as profound as love, well, that was just something that was physiological. It was something that it's part of, again, some type of an evolutionary mechanism that was part of the way that we compensate to the environment and might have provided some type of an advantage that allows the species to survive. Right? When you try to argue against that, if that is an a priori, meaning that is kind of like the heuristic, their starting point, until they exchange that for something else, something more true, we are part of the material world, but there's something more than that. Until they exchange that, because of what they experience in themselves, there is no way that you can prove anything. And this is where I love this little anecdote. G.K. Chesterton, do you know who G.K. Chesterton is? In his book, Orthodoxy, he talks about the madman. So is that the cow again?
Which one?